Texas!
He's a 10.
I choose this family.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 85 of 911 Lone Star Roundup. I'm one of your hosts, EJ, and with me today are my lovely co-hosts, Katie.
Hey guys.
And Grace.
Hi everyone.
Today we will be talking about season 4, episode 4 of 911 Lone Star, titled Abandoned. There's so much to talk about, so let's jump in now before we get sidetracked and start talking before the episode. So it doesn't leave us hanging for very long. So we jump right into where it ended. 403 ended last time with Carlos waking up on the floor after getting knocked out. He's definitely out of it. You can kind of tell he's kind of like, there's some blood on his head and he's bleeding or has been bleeding. He notices that his hands are zip tied and I think he's under the sink or like something because it's like a drain pipe, because it's like he can't be tied under much because under a counter, because most everything you just like slide off. So yeah, and there's just some like old lady in the living room or the kitchen, and it's like it was a very weird, like I don't even know, like June Cleaver moment, like waking up into it was freaky.
It was freaky, very freaky.
Yeah, it was. Oh my gosh, it was a little bit of a doubt your sanity about that, honestly.
I know, and like
Right.
the promos they showed before this, like the preview, like maybe the day or the day before the episode, it was like, all we saw is like an old woman and a man, and I was like, I know I've seen this on a show before, but I don't know what show or what movie or what it was, and it was driving me nuts.
And my roommate made a comment about it seeming like it was like a Hansel and Gretel type situation. I was like, yeah, but didn't they eat the kids? And I don't think that's going on here.
We're not getting cannibalism.
No, thank God.
I know. Can you imagine?
And so he kind of groans, and as he's waking up, and it catches her attention, and she tells him to like try not to move around a lot. She just got his head to stop bleeding, and then goes on to explain that she was hit on the head with a shovel, and he's like, by who? And she's like, me. I was like, oh God, this is how it's starting. And you can definitely tell he's disoriented, and she's asking, who's TK? And you could see him starting to get frustrated. He's trying to like loosen his hands and just get free. And he's like, talks about how TK is his fiance and how this lady is just like really randomly just excited. Oh, you're getting married? It's like, oh, how wonderful. This is
Also thinks
creepy.
TK's a girl.
Yeah, she
Right.
thinks she
Yeah.
thinks TK's a girl.
Yeah, she thinks TK's a girl, and she's like, yeah, TK was texting nonstop before I busted up your phone with the meat cleaver, which it goes along with the no context spoilers from that I think Fox posted, because they posted one with a meat hammer, and everyone's like, what does that mean?
I know, that's like me every week when I try to figure those out. And like this week I like knew what 2 of them were, but I was like, I don't know.
I was pretty sure with the mallet, it was probably destroying his phone. And, then this lady just like starts having a conversation with him, just like, yeah, my son hasn't met the right girl. And gee, I wonder why.
I know. Tell me
And
about it.
And she's like, oh, you woke up at the right time. She's like, and she's pulling cookies out of the oven. And she like offers one to Carlos. And he's like, no, thank you. And he's like so polite still. Like, no, thank you. And
He's completely like, what the hell did I just wake up to?
Literally.
And then she kind of like forces it on him. So he kind of like takes a bite of the cookie, and then he still like says thanks or whatever. And he's like trying to get free. And he asks if she'd untie his hand. And she's like, oh, she can't do that because her son will be home soon and he'll want to meet him. I'm like, oh, so this is how we're going to start the episode.
Literally.
Like we hadn't even gotten a commercial yet at this point. I was like, ugh.
I know. Like the whole episode, like I was on the edge of my seat, like especially when we got to like everything that happened with Carlos. I was like, oh my God, like what how's this gonna go?
So before we get any more of Carlos or any of that situation, we go to Owen, who's at the house. And he's working on talking with the FBI agents. They're trying to fit him with some sort of wire in his underwear, basically, because
Yeah.
they don't want it to be found. And he's apparently going to meet O'Brien, and they want to get him to say something on record on the call or on the recording. TK calls Owen because he's freaking out about not knowing where Carlos is and not knowing what to do. And at first the agent was like, well, you should take the call since it's your son. But then all of a sudden she starts like rushing him to get off the phone. I'm like, really? Stop it. Did you hear what he's talking about?
Well, yeah, he said, he's like, oh, I'm gonna take the call. And she's like, do you have to? And he's like, it's my son.
Right.
And so she was like, okay, then make it fast. So clearly
Yeah.
they passed the time expectancy.
Right. And so TK's asking for advice because he's like, Carlos didn't stay the night. He apparently stayed at the hospital with Iris all night, and he's not answering his phone. He's kind of ghosted me. He's not sure what he wants to do because he doesn't want to be the giving Carlos face like Owen and Gwen did, and then Owen's moving out. So it's like, okay, that makes sense. And I get it. TK was freaking out. So he went to his dad. I'm frustrated with the agents not letting him really keep his call. And then Owen's way of getting off the phone is, oh, I'm at the spa. I got to go. Bye. It was like,
Oh yeah,
the
'cause
spa,
like,
really?
why are you taking the day off? And it's like, oh, I heard you're taking the day off. Like, why?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I'm taking a spa day, which like but like TK wouldn't think anything less than that because it's Owen.
Right.
And just that whole
Yeah,
call,
like it works because
it's on brand.
it's Owen.
So on brand.
He would do it.
I know
Yeah.
exactly. Oh my god. Yeah, but like the whole advice thing, I was like, oh my god. After you got off the call, I was like, TK, asking your dad for advice is probably not like I don't know, not the best thing to do.
Right.
I'm not sure he's got the best advice just relationship wise, but also he might just have some ideas just to calm him down because he knows his son, which he wasn't really able to do because he got a little rushed.
So back with Carlos, the son of the older woman is back, and these are crazy people. I think in the previous scene, the woman went to get something out of the pantry, and there was a dead body at the bottom of the pantry that Carlos saw. And this whole, like, the son was like obviously freaky, and I was starting to piece together some of the puzzle, and I think Carlos was too. And like she introduces Carlos as he's engaged and his gun is in the crisper drawer.
I know.
And the guy goes to look at what's his stuff, because she had taken it, like emptied his pockets, and he looks and sees that Carlos is a cop. And the guy was like, well, what are you doing here? And Carlos he's like, I was coming to look for you. And he's like, yeah, I know what you were doing. He had seen Carlos carry Iris out the day before. He's like, well, I guess you found me. He's like, but nobody's gonna find you. And like, I think he was not because he obviously wasn't expecting to be found, so he was kind of caught off guard with this random guy in the house, because he just, I was starting, it's like, okay, this guy's luring like women who are homeless or something like that. But still not sure how he got Iris, because she had a car. Why would she be there? She didn't. That's a whole other question for later. And so this guy tells his mom to get the kit, and Carlos starts questioning the guys, about Donna Burton, because he's piecing together that the person in the closet is Donna, who was the person that Iris went to look for at the camp. And Carlos is like, so how many more bodies are we going to find, when we start digging up the house next door? And Carlos says how he had found the tunnel and somebody else is going to find it. And the guy said, well, too bad, because we're going to put you in it and then we're going to seal up both sides and nobody will ever know you're there. I was like, no, you're not. I think all of us would have like gone down and torn that house looking for Carlos.
Literally.
And the woman comes back with the kit, and it's just a bunch of needles and some vials of drugs. And then you see their morphine. And it's like, where's all the rest of them? And she's like talking about how her knee's been acting up, so she's been using some of the vials for pain management. And she's like, there's not enough to, knock him out. And I'm like, yeah, but let's not give him like more drugs, because we've already gone through this with Carlos before. I don't want him to go through this again. I don't want TK to go through it again. So he gives him whatever he has left. So it's not enough to completely knock him out, but it's enough to kind of like definitely subdue him. And he's trying to fight, but obviously not really able to, which obviously is why the guy has the drugs. And I didn't pick up on the guy's job, and I'm really surprised. I would have. Yeah. So Carlos kind of passes out on the floor again. Then you go back to the 126, and TK is wondering, Carlos mad at him. He's talking with the crew while they're kind of standing around in the kitchen, and he's like, well, what should I do? He's like, I can't reach out. Marjan, makes it a point to comment that Carlos isn't the kind of guy that just like pouts and like ghosts people when he's mad. And so like TK's glad that it seems like somebody else is agreeing that something's wrong, like, because TK's got this like bad feeling something is wrong, but he can't get a hold of Carlos to find out. So he talks Nancy into calling the hospital to check on Iris and see if Carlos is there. And she does make the call, and they find out that Carlos was never there. And Iris has been alone since last night. So Carlos was never there.
Yeah, and like those pictures, like before the season even started, of like TK looking just like not great for this episode, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm just glad that it was because Carlos is missing and not because they got like in a fight or something.
Yeah, me too. I don't want our dads to fight anymore.
Literally.
So TK obviously leaves the group and decides to call his next person of contact, Grace. Yay, I love this.
I know, same.
Love it.
So he calls and basically asks her to do something. She's like, what would you like me to do? And he's like, well, it's probably a little illegal. And she's like, well, how illegal are we talking? And he says, well, Carlos has gone AWOL and I can't find him and we can't find his phone. His phone's not answering. And so she actually puts in his number, which is like, how do you have his number memorized? It's not like you call him on his phone when he goes to work. He uses dispatch.
I know.
I was like, well, that's crazy that she has it memorized. So she ends up putting his number in and she finds that it's been disconnected. And she's like, the way that it's not responding means that the battery's either been taken out or it's been destroyed, which we know has been murdered in the old woman's kitchen, which confirms to TK that something is really wrong and it's not just Carlos ghosting them. And then we go back to the crazy people talking about how they can't kill Carlos. And the guy's like, well, I have to dump the car. And I was like, no, we just got the Camaro back. No.
I know. I was just like, when they mentioned the Camaro, I was like, oh my God, we have this.
Well, because I'd heard earlier in the season that, or a couple of seasons ago, that the company they used were contracting for the vehicles. They changed contracts or something and couldn't get some of the vehicles back. So they had to change some of them. I was like, then we haven't seen him driving except the police cruiser for several seasons.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm glad that they got a Camaro back. I don't think this is the exact one because I don't think it had a black thing on the hood.
It was blue before, I remember.
Yeah. Well, this one was blue, but it was a slightly different color blue. And it also had a black square on the front. I can't remember what they call that. It's like an external muffler or something. I don't know. Anyways, so we go off to Owen. He's sitting out in some dirt road with waiting for O'Brien on his motorcycle. And O'Brien comes up and he's like, I didn't think you'd show up, or was kind of hinting basically that the conversations that they were having, O'Brien had been dropping hints to him to not show up, but Owen didn't get the hints because he was because Owen was using a code 999, or O'Brien was using 999, which I guess is cop code for like distress or something. And Owen wasn't picking up on it because he's like, I'm a firefighter.
Literally.
I mean, to be fair, he did not.
Right. And O'Brien and him were supposed to talk, but the honor dogs show up and they're like, let's go for a ride. And so they all end up going, well, so this is not good. And then we arrive at a house and it's like, I think everybody's fan fiction dreams crumbled to find out that Carlos's family doesn't have a ranch. Oh, sorry.
I know, but like I love seeing like it's like people like I think everyone was freaking out. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is the house that Carlos grew up in.
Yes, I know. That's what I was thinking. It's like, oh my God, this is the house that built him. So TK shows up at the Reyes' house. He's looking for Carlos, so he comes over. And this is very parallel to a certain episode when Carlos goes to Owen and Gwen to find out if TK was there. Just saying.
Oh yes.
There's
like,
a lot of parallels in this episode.
Yeah, there's so many parallels, and this is the one I didn't even think of. So yes.
Okay. So Gabriel answers the door, and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And TK's like, "Was Carlos here?" No, he's not. And they're like, "Well, we haven't talked with him." And then Andrea comes out, and she's all happy to see TK, and she, she obviously TK's been going on a health binge because she's making vegan lunch.
Vegan chili and cauliflower tacos. Like, can I come over for lunch?
And then she kind of notices TK's kind of tense. She's like, what's going on? And Gabriel says, TK's looking for Carlos. She's like, what do you mean? Isn't he at work? And TK's like, no, he has the day off. No, actually he doesn't. He's just kind of missing. Technically he was supposed to work that day. And TK explains that he was supposed to see Iris at the hospital, but Carlos was never there. He's been calling and texting him all day, but he's not answering. And then obviously mommy is panicking because her son's missing and nobody can find him. And I would be panicked too. So Gabriel's trying to calm her down, and TK explains that Carlos had his personal car. So there's Gabriel's like, well, I can put a bolo out for, him or for the car and Carlos. And then TK gets a call from Grace at the same time, explaining that she was able to triangulate where Carlos's last call was from. And that was to TK from the house outside the house that they found Iris in the night before. And so Gabriel asks Grace to send them the address so they can go check it out. And I was like, yes, we get Papa Reyes and TK working together. Yes. Again, a parallel, just like Owen and Carlos looking for TK. I'm loving the parallels.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
So we get back to Owen and O'Brien, and they're not real happy with them, but they're kind of forced to kind of sit around, and it seemed like they were letting them stew together. I don't know, it's all I could figure out. And it didn't last long, but I can remember. And honestly, I was so focused on Carlos and TK and all that storyline that this just kind of like was mush in my brain.
honestly, I think all of like those scenes should have been pushed to a different episode. Like, I don't know, like it just kind of it was still very good and like loved it, but like those parts I really didn't care about. I was just like, no.
Yeah, so basically Owen had met, he's talking with O'Brien, and O'Brien basically figures out that, the FBI is asking to set up a meeting and all that drama. And then we go back to Gabriel and TK. They're arriving at the house, and surprisingly, the Camaro is not out front because the dude had taken Carlos's car prior to this and stashed it. And it was weird because when they kind of panned down the street, you could see like the houses that were like obviously abandoned, and then there's this one house that's like nice yard, nice fence, looks like it's in good condition. I was like, obviously something's up. Why are they still there?
I know, that confused me though, because like in my mind at the end of the last episode when he just crawled through another house, I was thinking you couldn't even see that house from the street, like the house that they were in. Right. And that Carlos was, like captain in this whole episode. I was like, okay, you can see it from the street, so then why didn't they canvass the whole neighborhood?
Right. Which, yeah, I mean, I'm really surprised. But again, the damn detective did not believe Iris's story. And so why would they? So we've got lady. And Gabriel and TK go into the house that they initially had found Iris in, and then you can tell Carlos is at the other house with this crazy woman again, because at this point the son had gone to run an errand and drop off Carlos's car, and the lady's like, it's nothing personal to Carlos when he kind of wakes up again, and it's like, what do you mean? You're just freaking crazy, let him go.
I know.
And so Gabriel and TK start poking around. I'm like, I know that Gabriel purposely, like, he had to call her because technically it's her case and he's a major in the Rangers. And so if he's going into her crime scene, he has to report it. Like, seriously, of all the freaking people we had to deal with again, it's that stupid detective. And I'm pretty much feeling the same way TK felt.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
So the detective ends up showing up, and she's like, she didn't believe, and I'm glad TK called her out on it about how he's like, you never believed that Iris is here, and now Carlos is missing. And TK had every right to blow up at her, and I'm hoping that we don't have to deal with her again, because I don't need her judgment in another episode, because I just...
Yeah.
Because, and she was saying like, well, attackers don't just vanish into thin air. And TK's like, neither does my fiance.
Which he had a really good point.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And he even says, like, there's no way in hell Carlos would disappear unless something happened. And, Gabriel and him had ended up in the room that they had originally found Iris in. And then TK kind of goes into another room. But so Gabriel could kind of talk with the detective, and TK's kind of pacing in the living room area, and he kind of leans over and he finds the burned ID of Donna Burton, which is the woman again that Iris was looking for. And he calls them out and says, shows them that. And Gabriel's looking at the detective like, well, did you canvass the house? Did you find anything? Did you look for anything? And she's like, well, no, we didn't believe the story. And he's like, oh, well, obviously you were wrong. And they're like, we need to start canvassing. And TK's like, I'm not going to wait. And he's looking at on his phone for like pictures of him and Carlos. I was like, oh my God, that's a photo Rafa and Ronan took, like season 1. It was like such like, you could tell it was Rafa and Ronan, but oh my God, we got like, now it's canon. Like it's real.
They look like such babes. Like,
yeah,
it was only like 4 years ago, but still.
Right. And that, it seemed like it's early season 1 too, so it's not even like into their relationship at all.
I know, and just the fact of like what episode it's from episode 5, and I'm just like, man, to go back then.
Yeah. I need to go back and do a marathon of the series.
I know, same.
So they start calling police officers and they start canvassing. TK goes next door to the lady and he has no idea what he's going to be walking up to. And she sees on their Ring camera that somebody's at the door. So she tapes Carlos's mouth shut and then she grabs a knife. And when she goes to answer the door, he can see the video screen to see who's there. And he realizes it's TK. And she kind of had threatened Carlos not to scream or make any noises. So TK was asking, kind of explaining the situation, asking if she saw anything out of the ordinary, shows him a picture of his fiance that's missing. And she's like, oh, he's handsome. And TK's like, yeah, I think so too. And now he's my fiance. And then he's like, oh, is that so? And TK admits that, it's like, we think he went missing in this area last night, possibly next door. And Carlos, trying to get his attention, knocks the shovel over that's in the kitchen. And then the lady is like, tries to excuse it by saying that it's her cat.
I know.
Yeah. That was a moment.
And she kind of just, gets TK away and she's like, oh, I got to go take care of this. So TK leaves and the lady goes back to Carlos. She's like, I didn't know you were gay. I love the gays. What the hell?
I was a little worried about this, if I was being honest. I was like, okay, it's either going to be a non-issue or a bigger issue.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And like people were like, oh my God, I love this lady. When she said that, I was like, honestly, I was like, what the hell, lady?
Yeah, I know. And then she's like, she wished her son was gay. Like,
I was like, what? What the heck is
like,
going on?
What has she been smoking for
I
50
know.
some odd years? They are, at some point during the canvassing, TK and Gabriel end up going back to the police station and are kind of looking over some missing persons reports and some people obviously found that kind of meet the same descriptions that Iris, and everything they're kind of looking at is pointing to a serial killer, that somebody is targeting women who are living in a halfway house. And TK's like, why are we here? We should totally be out looking for Carlos. And then like through what they're saying, he's like, you're thinking you're talking about a serial killer. And Gabriel's like, yeah, we are. Like, how can you keep a straight face? I think even TK called him out. It's like, how can you be so calm right now? But I love what Gabriel said. He's like, don't you think that it's tearing me up? He's like, what I have to tell his mother, like, I don't want to be in Gabriel's position right now. And that Gabriel reminds TK that, you're not the only one that loves Carlos. And he's like, if there are tears to weep, we'll do that when the time comes, but not before. And right now, Carlos needs them to be strong and to find him. I'm like, okay. This is what TK needed. This is the dad relationship TK needed because he's not getting much from his father right now.
I know. I love this. I loved all like the Gabriel TK stuff. It was so good. And like, we're finally like getting like not even just Gabriel and TK, but also like we got like, the whole like Reyes family practically.
Right.
In
and
TK. So good.
I can't remember what order it came in, but when the detective showed up and when TK was getting heated with her at the house, Gabriel called TK his son, and I think Andrea had called him Mijo. And I was like, oh my God, the pet names are already starting. I love it.
Oh, it makes me so happy.
Because just 2 seasons ago when Carlos was sharing, he's like, I didn't even think my parents had ever supported. And like now they're calling TK their son. I love it.
We stand supportive parents.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
And so Owen, in his situation, is now talking with one of the honor dogs. And they're basically talking about how there's a rat in the club. And O'Brien had explained to Owen that he had once started the club 20 some odd years ago after 9/11 as a group of motorcycle enthusiasts who were first responders or kind of worked in the line of duty, things that were dangerous and were just kind of a hobbyist type thing. And it somewhere along the way turned into a little darker, and he got out before it got worse. And so now he's back looking for his nephew. And I'm like, oh, this is not gonna go well. And of course, while Owen's talking to all of them, he's like, I'm wearing a wire.
I know, like, how dumb are you to admit you're wearing a wire? Like, are you kidding me?
I just couldn't believe
So
it.
Owen, I couldn't believe it, but also I was like, that is just something Owen would do. He'd be like, oh, I'm wearing a wire, you dumbass.
Yeah. And how he didn't get hurt for that.
I know, like, how did they not like just like rough him up a bit?
Right. So back at the station, TK's helping. They're going through folders and records of some of these women that have already gone missing, that they have kind of some evidence on, but have no idea what it connects to. And Gabriel's asking if they found a connection yet, and they're like, no, they don't have the same doctor, they don't have the same prescriber, they don't have the same. And then TK realizes that they have the same pharmacy, which leads to, we have a brief scene of the guy going to the pharmacy, and one of the employees recognizing him. He's like, oh, I thought you were off today. So we find out he's a pharmacist and has access to all the drugs. And he's like, oh, I forgot something, I'm off today. But he's like, I just forgot something. So he goes in and steals some more vials of morphine and skips out. And then just after he leaves, Gabriel and TK show up asking questions about the pharmacist who's like filled all those prescriptions. And lo and behold, it's that guy.
Yeah.
Like, if only they'd just been there like a few minutes earlier.
I know, like, that's so suspicious. Like, how do you not realize when he comes in basically on his bike, just to come in on his day off to grab something?
Right.
And like, that was just like, really? That
Yeah.
was so weird.
Oh yeah. And how the guy at the counter didn't question that.
I know, I would have questioned that.
Yeah, because in my experience, a pharmacy is usually pretty locked up, like Fort Knox with some things, and he could just randomly walk back there without, being on the clock, and nobody asked questions. Yeah. So. Yeah. Anyways, so back at the house, the crazy lady and Carlos, he starts asking if TK's still out there, and she's like, oh no, he's long gone. And she's like, there's just officers out there now. And so Carlos decides to start yelling, and the lady's like, oh no. It's like, I was like, he should have done that a long ass time ago. But I get why he wasn't. And so she starts freaking out. She goes and I'm trying to piece it together because I get what happened. He starts screaming. An officer outside hears it, but then quickly the woman puts on some music really loud so it muffles any of the noise. And then she threatens him with a knife and basically says, don't stop. And she puts the tape back over his mouth. And I'm glad he was yelling. Personally, I know how you can break zip ties. I think, honestly, Carlos is strong enough. He probably could have pulled those pipes out of the wall. Just saying.
I know,
And there
I'm
was
surprised he didn't.
And I was looking at it. I was like, you could have just unscrewed that one ring and would have totally removed the pipe. I was like, but that's just me. And unfortunately, the cop outside did not hear anything else, so she didn't go to investigate, which is like ad cop 101.
I was like, good police work we're doing here.
Oh my
But
God.
the entire episode was riddled with bad law enforcement.
Right. And when the woman does start threatening Carlos with the knife, he finally stops yelling, and he's like, okay, I'll stop. And Carlos and Gabriel do end up finally getting the pharmacist's name and his address, because the woman was like, well, I can't give out information about our patients. So we're not looking for information on your patients. We're looking for the information on this pharmacist. So with Carlos and the crazy lady again, he's starting to go through the begging of, he's wanting her to let him go. And she has no need to keep him there. She could totally just let him go. And she doesn't want to. And she's talking about how she's trying to protect her son. And Carlos starts telling, he's like, he's a monster. And we see her son's kind of writing back. And she'd been freaking out. She's like, oh my God, I hope the police leave soon. My son is not going to be happy if they're here. And I'm like, I don't care if your son's happy or not.
I know, literally.
I need to be there for a reason. And, because as far as Carlos knows, they're going to try and kill him. He's like, killing him won't make her son love her. And, he's not capable of love. This is what Carlos is saying. And she says that, to Carlos, it's like, I bet you love your mother. And he's like, with all my heart. I was like, oh, I love that. And the lady mentions TK. I'm like, okay, keep that. Nope, I'm not happy. But she's like, I bet he loves his mom, and asks if, he and his mother get along. And Carlos is like, no son loved his mother more than TK loved Gwen. And she's like, oh, did he lose his mom? And Carlos is like, yeah, last year. So we have kind of a timeline of this is about a year after Gwen died. She's like, older lady's like, that's sad, that she won't be at the wedding. But Carlos is like, no, I think she will be. Sometimes I feel all the love she had for him, she's sending it through me. Otherwise, I don't know where all this love comes from. I was like, oh my God.
My heart when he said that, I was like, oh my God, like,
it's like, they need to get married like tomorrow. Can that like happen like soon? It's like,
I know.
I love it. And so the lady's like, you could definitely see her like kind of processing stuff. And she's finally says, she's like, okay. She's like, I'm gonna let you go. And she wanted to get him out of there before obviously her son got back. She's like, my son, she's like, Daryl'll be mad at me, but when isn't he? I was like, so she like it's the zip ties on his feet and hands. And just as Carlos is standing up, which he's very shaky from the drugs and just probably the concussion, the son shows back up and he's like, what's going on here? And I love what Carlos did. He grabbed the pot that was on the stove and like smacks the son in the head, and they kind of knocks him to the ground, and they start rolling around on the floor fighting in the living room. And I was like, it's about damn time that we have Carlos fighting with like a police suspect, because we have not seen it. Oh my God, he is so talented.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I know that Rafa has some sort of martial arts experience. I think he did Brazilian jiu-jitsu for a while. So I thought that was really cool. But I'm like, I'm tired of seeing Carlos just as a patrol officer. I was like, I'm glad he's starting to get some moments. And while they're fighting and struggling, Trudy, unfortunately, has a lapse in judgment and fills a syringe with the entire vial of morphine and jabs it in Carlos's arm. And that's not good at all. But thankfully, as he's falling and collapsing, Gabriel and TK barge in the door and start yelling, and everything's kind of blurring together because Carlos is passing out, and TK like runs right to Carlos, and Gabriel's got the gun on the other two. And obviously this was tough. This was hard to watch. I've watched it like I feel like 1,000 times since then, but oh my God, it's so good. But I also feel really bad for TK having to go through this, because it's one thing to do CPR on your, somebody you don't know, but to do it on your significant other or anyone you're close to is like, that's something you never want to do. And so he has to start doing CPR on Carlos, and he's doing the rescue breaths and the CPR, and Gabriel is yelling for an ambulance to come or any cruiser. And TK saying, when he finds out, he sees the vial of morphine, he's like, how much was in here? She's like, the entire bottle. I'm like, that's enough freaking morphine to kill a horse. And TK just keeps going. And finally the officers show up and run in with a syringe of Narcan, and TK jabs it into Carlos's leg, the same leg that Owen jabbed Narcan into TK's leg in season 1.
Right, yeah.
So there's another
said that he did that on purpose. So that way it was this parallel.
We love the parallels. And so it was hard because like he gives him the Narcan, and there's really nothing you can do until the Narcan kicks in. So you've got that like couple of second moment of just like waiting of like, oh shit. And finally Carlos like gasps as he starts to wake up, and then he kind of panics and like pushes everybody away, not realizing it's TK and Gabriel at first. And TK's like, it's me, it's okay, calm down. And then you've got Gabriel and TK kind of surrounding him, and just him collapsing into Gabriel was like, that was another parallel to when Owen hugged TK when TK finally woke up from the OD.
Right, yeah, that was so emotional. Like, especially like when Carlos woke up and he was like, "Get off me, get off me," and not realizing it's them. Right. And like you could even see when when TK and Gabriel got close to him, that like Gabriel was like, crying a little bit, like his eyes were like welting up. It was like, oh.
Yeah, and he, you could definitely tell he was trying to be strong. Just like he had told TK, but how can you not? Your son's in that situation. And even like throughout the whole ordeal, he was saying like, come on, mijo, and screaming through the radio to like, somebody needs to hurry. And yeah, this was just really good. LoneStar hit it out of the park with this. This was amazing. Obviously, Trudy and her son get arrested, and Carlos is being wheeled out on an, on a gurney. And he's like, asked Gabriel if he had talked to Andrea, and he's like, yeah, she's at the hospital already decorating her room, and Iris is with her.
Helping. Yeah, I love that.
Carlos is like, this is ridiculous. I don't need to go to the hospital. TK's like, are you out of your mind? You just died. And Carlos is like, look who's talking.
That was so good to hear. Like,
yeah, it was good. I know some people were really bummed that we didn't get any more after this scene, but I was like, I'll take what I can get, and this is freaking amazing. And Carlos does end up, he's like, he thanks TK for saving his life. And TK's like, oh, baby, you saved your own life. I was just holding on to it for a while. And Carlos like puts his hand on TK's cheek and is like, it's yours.
Okay, that broke me.
Yeah,
I mean, like, all their interactions broke me this episode.
Oh, yeah. And when Carlos is loaded into the ambulance, Gabriel stands with TK for a second, and he's like, he's lucky to have you. And TK says, hey, you too. And Gabriel asks if he's going to ride with him. I'm like, oh, again, another parallel from 208.
Yeah.
And TK's like, yeah. And TK tries to call Owen again, and Owen doesn't answer his phone. And he'd done it a couple other times that Owen didn't answer. And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So I know there's a lot of fans that were really pissed at Owen during this episode because of the lack of communication with TK and being there for his son. I really don't know what to say to that.
I mean, I liked the Gabriel stuff, so I really didn't care that Owen was there. I was honestly kind of glad that he wasn't, just because I felt like we needed like Gabriel and TK to have something.
Yeah. And
it just needed to be more about Carlos, and I feel like it makes more sense that Gabriel was there. Also, he's a cop, he's a ranger. Like he needs to be there. Like Owen will just be playing, cop, not actually having anything to do with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, to be fair, TK didn't know anything about what was happening with Owen behind the scenes.
Right.
So in order to have done any like catching up, that would have had to divert a lot from the actual episode itself, and that's just not up. That's just not.
So after getting the voicemail, TK gets in the ambulance with Carlos, and that's kind of the last of their scenes. And there's, like, I know we've already mentioned a couple, and there's so many parallels. We see Carlos obviously ODing on the morphine, which is a parallel to 101. We've got TK's overdose. They're both in white shirts.
Oh yeah, that was a cool one that I didn't even realize watching the episode, but people were talking about it after, and I'm like, wait, they were like, these were so many things that were just so like that's not something that that's just so detailed.
Yeah. They're both Ronan said he stabbed the EpiPen in the same leg that Owen had stabbed TK on purpose, just for that. Then we get, Gabriel and TK standing outside the ambulance is parallel to 208. TK freaking out and going to Grace for help, and then also and then so many moments from 208 were parallel. And I was like, yes, I love the parallels, and I love bringing the full circle. The only thing I think could have added to it was like, he's an impressive guy. Somehow getting that line in there would have been cool.
Yeah, a lot of people said that. I mean, I'm okay with what they did because
oh yeah, for sure.
Like, I don't know. Like, honestly, if they added like all the lines that happened in 208 with Gabriel and Carlos, with Gabriel and TK, I feel like it would have been they were trying too hard.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like if they had put in an impressive guy, it just would have been fan service, and so it wouldn't have rang quite
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yep. And then kind of to end out this show, we have a final scene with O'Brien and Owen. They're both walking out of the FBI. Both of them. Well, actually, I take that back. Owen's waiting outside the FBI, and O'Brien is walking out. O'Brien's like, so do they want to talk to me now? He's like, yeah, I don't think they want to ever see you again. And he's like, they said they have everything under control, and they have highly encouraged us to never speak of this again to anybody. So they are being frozen out of the case now. And the final scene of the episode is we kind of see some makings of this, something coming for the 126. We got pictures of Owen, pictures of the 126. I'm like, can we not have a season where the 126 gets blown up? I'm just asking. They just rebuilt it. Please do not give Billy any more reason to not open that firehouse.
For Billy to just leave leave his other land and come over here.
Yeah, leave fire country.
Yeah, leave fire country.
Yeah, so that was how the episode ended. Oh my god, this was a freaking amazing episode. Rafa totally I knew he would do it. I knew he would be amazing, and he was 1,000 times over. It was so good to see TK on the other side of the stressful situation and not being the one hurt, injured, or kidnapped. Which is weird to say. Like, it's not that I want Carlos to get hurt, but it has been very many times TK has gotten hurt or had some near-death experiences. It's time for somebody else. Did I want it to be Carlos? No, but I'm glad we got it because Rafa killed it. He's freaking amazing.
Oh, no, I'll be straight out and say I wanted it to be Carlos.
I know, same.
Just simply so we would have the roles reversed.
Yes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We needed
like,
it.
It was about time.
Yes. I feel like this episode was so amazing. I do feel like there were some scenes cut out of it. I feel like there might have been a scene with Andrea and TK that was cut.
Possibly. I don't know. I mean, I do think if they like had moved the Owen stuff to a different episode, just because it kind of didn't really make sense for this episode. I mean, I get they're trying to build stuff up for the storyline to like happen or whatever.
Yeah.
Like with the underdogs, but like a lot of people are like, okay, if they had taken that out and just moved it to a different episode, this episode would have been perfect.
To be fair, I don't think it would have made much sense to have iced it out completely.
Yeah. So still going on.
Unless we literally had no scenes except for that between orienting around TK and Carlos, which they could have done, but it would have still had a weird dynamic.
Yeah.
There would have been they could have pulled off none of the 126 scenes. I get what people are saying, but at the same time, I don't personally agree because I think this was the only real way to do things without making it just a little weird.
Yeah, I'm fine with the Owen scenes. I'm sure when I go back and rewatch it again, I'll pay more attention now that I kind of like, okay, Carlos is okay. Carlos was rescued. Because like there was a small part of me that was like, is he not going to get rescued at the end of this episode? And like, is he not, like, is this going to be another couple episodes? Like, I was worried about that.
I know people are like, to me, they're like, oh my God, I hope Carlos is dead. And I'm like, okay. First of all, like they're filming episode 13 right now, and Rafa was, seen there, so we know Carlos is safe. I was like, so there's no worry there. And also, like, there's just so many other pictures that have been posted that we know are for upcoming episodes at some point. So I'm like, we know it's happening. Like, Ronan did say in that interview that in episode 8 will be like the parents taking over the wedding planning kind of thing, which I'm excited for that now, knowing that. So like there's so much happening.
Yeah. And of course, Ronan, he live tweeted during the East Coast.
I know, I love that.
He kept posting pictures and like clips on Instagram and his stories about like, oh my God, this is how the fandom feels right now. And yeah, it was really good.
So much because like it's like he's so much of a fan of the show, just like we are. Like especially seeing that stuff, like I'm like, okay, you get it.
I actually was gone. I had a practice I had to be at for music, and so I could not. And it's in a building that unfortunately don't have a lot of cell phone service, so I wasn't getting any of the notifications, which was probably a good thing because I would have been on those like crazy keeping up with like what's going on. So I got home like right before it aired on the Pacific, so I was able to watch it. And at least I got the entire episode this week because the previous week like got preempted. And yeah, so and since recording this, we found out like they were the #1 highest rated show on Tuesdays. I'm freaking proud of Lone Star cast and crew.
I know, like that, like that's why I'm not worried at all, like with ratings, because I'm like, then we get stuff like that, and I'm like, okay, yeah. We're doing great.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. There's still some concern about it being on it, but hey, 911 comes back in a few weeks, and so we'll have 2 nights of 911 instead of just one. I'm kind of liking that idea.
I'm so excited.
I know.
Yeah. I high praise for Rafa, high praise for the entire cast and crew, and I'm proud of them. I knew that they would do great. They always do, but yeah. So it's my 2 cents. You have any fan thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's just one, but that's okay. Short and sweet. Absolutely amazing. The acting was insane from both Rafa and Ronan. Will forever be one of my favorite episodes. I definitely agree with that. Like, this is definitely, I don't know, just the episodes so far, I think. I don't know, this has to be a favorite just for like the Carlos stuff. Like for Rafa, yeah. It's incredible.
Right.
Like his reactions through all of this is just like, it's just like amazing. Like I can't even say.
And
Like no
sometimes-
one sleep on Rafa as an amazing actor.
I
Right.
know he's incredible.
Sometimes I have to pinch myself because I have to remember that, or not remember, but I remind myself often, this is his first major role.
Right.
And he's killing it. Like he's
Oh, for
doing
sure.
so good.
Mhm.
He is a talent. Lone Star better hang on to him forever. And
I know.
Ronan. Okay, so there are a few, I would say some parallels to Smiley Face Killers, but not to the extent of that's movie. won't
I
even talk about-
know. I know. Yeah, we did mention that
I
last
mentioned
week.
it last week, and I was like, okay, there's a few. I'm not going to go into too much, but the drugging and the following and the creepy people and so honestly, we really didn't know, and I don't really think we'll ever will, like the actual specific reason why that guy was targeting those girls. Was it because he was looking for a wife and that's what he figured what he would only be able to get? Was it was just a crazy like, you're psychotic and this is just what you're doing because you could get away with it because they're people that nobody's looking for? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved it. So the promo was short and sweet for next episode. We get a fire call. There's a flashover. It's a building on fire. Marjan had gone in with some others and she's ordered to get out. I guess she froze up on a call and she made a mistake and she didn't want to do it wrong. And she announces that she's resigning from the AFD, and Owen tells her she can't unring that bell. And we see TK and Nancy as Owen rides off on his motorcycle. So there's really not a lot.
Yeah.
Which I'm not surprised about, just because we got such an intense episode. They're probably just really leaving it all to like, we'll give them some time to process.
Yeah, this is gonna be interesting because I'm wondering if it's gonna be like another like focus episode on somebody, which would be totally cool. And like I had read that like person that I doesn't save her or whatever, like that like Owen has to defend her or whatever, and like I'm watching the promo and I'm like, she's like, I'm resigning. I'm like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
That is so dramatic.
Yeah, well, and it sounds to me kind of a lot like they're maybe the family of somebody that she's not able to save sues the department and blames her,
Yeah, I think
and so
that's
she
what it was.
decides instead of dealing with all the fallout, she's just going to resign. And Owen's like, no, because she did nothing wrong. Owen was the one that ordered everybody out.
Right, yeah. And when she says that, she's like talking to like the team, and just kind of gives her that look like, yeah, sure you are.
Right. And I don't know. I know we've got some intense episodes coming up, and obviously what they dropped the hints of in the end of this episode with the 126 being targeted. I'm curious who it is, but I feel like it'll be a few episodes before we get to the aftermath of that. So this might be more of a Marjan centric episode, which will be cool.
Yeah, definitely.
'Cause I love her, and we haven't seen much of her thus far. Just want to see some Carlos and TK. Carlos resting.
Yeah.
TK
And I
like
want to see
playing-
Carlos recovering.
Carlos recovering. Carlos not. TK like nursing him, and it's like, no, you can't do that. They said you had to do this.
I know.
TK, I'm fine.
Literally, like if the show doesn't give it to us, we know the fan fiction is coming.
Oh yeah,
It's probably
for
already
sure.
out.
Yeah, there's already some, which is good. Feel like, I mean, it's not something that's just going to go away. I don't think Carlos can just let that go. So I feel like there's going to be some after effects, whether it's the medication issue of ODing on opioids again and going down that rabbit hole. And if that's the case, then holy crap, boy, at least he's got a boyfriend or fiance that has been there. But I also feel like Carlos was raised to kind of just compartmentalize. So he's going to try to compartmentalize and he's not going to be able to. So I sure hope he starts having some therapy.
I know.
Yes, give my boy some therapy.
He needs some. And I know that Ronan had mentioned in an interview that was shared after the show aired that doing the CPR on Rafa, he's like, I'm basically doing it for real on Rafa. And he was like directed to like keep his eyes closed, not move. And like TK's like, or Ronan was like, he's like, yeah, I'm trying to do it to make it look real, but also not trying to like actually do it. And like, because if you do CPR correctly, you will break ribs.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah. You're supposed to go a couple inches into the chest.
Yeah. which will break ribs and the sternum, and it could do damage. And that's why they warn you, like, if you ever come across a situation where you have to do that, it's like you really have to take that consideration of, are you going to put this person's life in your hands? Because you could be held liable for helping that person if you break ribs and puncture a lung by doing CPR. So and so I was like hearing what Ronan was explaining about that. And I think at one point Rafa came up to Ronan on set and kind of made a comment about he could still hear things going on. And he's like, it was just really creepy, laying there, like having it done to him, and then like can still hear everything going on around him. It's like chills. But those two work so well together. And I know we didn't get a lot of Tarlos together, but we definitely got a lot of Tarlos this episode. And it was on Valentine's Day, which was cool because Carlos was TK's bloody Valentine.
Yeah. It was
that's
like
one
the
way.
pictures posted though before. It was like, oh, happy Valentine's Day, you're getting this. And it's like, oh, great.
Thank you guys so much for joining and listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Anchor. We're also on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, and everywhere you get your podcasts. On iTunes and Spotify, please rate us and leave us a review. It would mean a lot to us. You can follow the podcast on our socials at 911 LS Roundup on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and now TikTok. And we're also in our Discord server. The link is in the description of this podcast and also in our Instagram bio.
You guys can follow me, Katie, Apple Tarlos, on Instagram and TikTok.
You guys can follow me, Grace, at RonanRafa911 on Instagram and at CheapGirl31 on Twitter.
And you can follow me, EJ, at EJ8302 on Instagram, Twitter, and most social platforms. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.